We all want something to succeed. We may think it won't, but we want it to succeed. What I'm not prepared to do is say, I'm going to wait around, see you fail, and then say, I told you so. That's just no use, right? I mean, that's just negative. Whereas if I say, I don't think it'll work for these 3 reasons, they say, yeah, we're going to try it anyway. We think it'll work. I'm going to go, okay, disagree, but I'm going to commit. So anything I can do to help you make that project successful, even if I don't think it's going to be, I will. I'm not going to be happy when it fails. I'm going to be annoyed, and I'm going to make sure we retro it and make sure we learn from it.
Welcome to the How They Lead podcast, hosted by Benjamin Wade and Ben Stocker. This podcast is dedicated to exploring the world of high performance, showcasing examples of how individuals and teams can reach their full potential.
Together, they'll be inviting amazing guests who have defined or represented high performance in their own right, from world record breakers to individuals who have achieved first in their fields. The How They Lead podcast will showcase a diverse range of guests, each with their unique stories and insights to share. So join us as we challenge traditional ways of doing things, explore new ideas, methods and possibilities, and evolve the way people perform. Steve, welcome. Thanks very much to joining us on our podcast, How They Lead, one of the first episodes that we've been running. Basically, we're trying to have conversations with people at the rock face of leadership, contemporary leadership, high-performing teams, people who are making, leading, running those teams in the 21st century, like yourself. What we're trying to achieve from this podcast is to tap into people that our listeners might not otherwise be able to, and try and gain some lessons from this free knowledge, almost like a library of information and lessons to take away and implement back within their business, back within their team, or just to be better as an individual. So thanks for your time and welcome. We've got about 45 minutes to have a chat to you and see if we can tap into some of your knowledge and your expertise. I think Ben wants to try and tap into your background to start with, a little intro.
Yeah, Steve, great to have you on the podcast. I think we'll kick off with, it'd be great to understand a bit about who you are, the business you run, and how you've got to become the CEO of that business and where you've taken it.
Sure, no, pleasure. And thanks for having me on. I should say I had a bit of a cricketing accident last week in the nets just before the season. So unfortunately it means my hit's going a little bit. So I'll shuffle around, just so you know, that's why I'm shuffling around. Bit of background about me. The company I run is called Zappi. We are an automation company, so we automate the process of doing great quality market research. So big companies like Pepsi or Mars or a Unilever, that type of company would use us to test ideas before they launch them into the wild. So it might be an advertising campaign, it might be a new packaging concept, it might be a new price point, it might be a new product or service. And before it goes out into the market, they want to know, is this the best we can do? Can we improve it? How successful is it likely to be? Obviously, those are big questions, a lot of risk. We will help them answer those questions, but in a very agile way. So we'll give them data, we'll give them inspiration, we'll give them reports and ideas back so that they can optimize and validate those ideas before they go in. And we'll do that in a sort of, one day turnaround time, unlike the old world that I used to be in, which was 3-4 week time frame. So that's what we do as a company. The way I got to founding the company is that my background is in consumer insight. So I've always been in market research. I worked in London for about a year in the early 90s, then worked in Asia for 6 years, worked in New York for 6 years, and then came back and started my first company about 19 years ago. Came back to London, started a small company. This is my 4th company. So I've been a bit of a serial entrepreneur in this space. But it was I founded the company about 10 years ago. It was probably a year before that I came up with the idea. And it was one of those sort of 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration things. So I came up with the entire idea for the whole strategy of the company for the first 5 years, over a couple of glasses of wine in my garden. So I was just frustrated at trying to innovate in this space. And I started thinking, what is that clients moan about? And actually, they really like consumer insight. They really like getting market research reports. It helps them make smart decisions, right? But they always moaned about how long it took and how much it cost. So I thought, how on earth can I make that quicker and cheaper? And the obvious answer was automation. So I came up with the idea of creating, it'll sound dated, but take yourself back 10 years, the app store of the market research world. So that was the initial idea. And that's really what we spent the first 5 years doing. But my problem to begin with is I knew nothing about technology. So I'm the CEO of a software company now who knew literally nothing about technology. I'm a little bit dangerous now, I still don't know that much. And what I ended up doing is going through a series of partners. So I went to about 3 or 4 companies I knew. All of them said, yeah, great idea, I'll help you work on it. And then they backed out for various reasons. They were doing something else corporately or whatever. And then I ended up finding a small technology company that was doing some of the stuff I needed. Cut a long story short, we ended up working together on it. And eventually they gave up their business and just joined Zappi. So we did a merger effectively. So we have the CEO of that company became the CTO. So we have me with the domain expertise and them with the technology expertise. So that's a very brief sort of overview of my background and also how I've come to lead Zappi.
Yeah, great, thank you. I think like we can probably relate. Like so, West Peak was kind of founded and grew because our wives were friends and kind of that forced us to go cycling.
Forced to be friends, weren't
we were forced to be friends. So yeah, definitely lots of perspiration. 1%. We can relate. We can relate to that. Okay. I'm really like, I think you've got obviously like continents of experience in terms of business and working with different people. And then you've grown Zappi to, I think you're about 300 plus people now.
Yeah. So we're sort of $60 million. We think in dollars. Most of our revenue frankly is in the US. We're about 60-70% in the US. We have 4 or 5 offices in the US, and about 330 people. Yeah.
Okay, so you've got 330 people. You've got people US, UK, around the world, and you've got a decent amount of experience of leading people and teams. So I think my first question is going to be around like your approach to leading people. So I'm going to give you one sentence. You might break my rule, but we'll see. If I would say to you, Steve, you've got one sentence to describe your approach to leading people, what would you say back to me?
I would say inspire and listen. Those are the 2 mantras, I would say.
So inspire and listen. That's the shortest response we've had.
Very succinct. Yeah, that is. Yep.
Succinct. So good. Full stop. Inspire and listen. Full stop. Now, tell me what inspire and listen mean to you on a day-to-day basis.
So for me, every company I founded with a vision. I founded with a direction of where I wanted to go, an idea. Now I work on the product much more than I worked on marketing or clients within the company. And I care about where we're going. And what I want is people who will help me get there, who will join on that mission. That we're all going to try and do that thing. Quite what you do when you get there, that's another question, but hopefully we don't need to worry about it. But we have a very clear mission now. So that does tweak over time, but I see my job as making everyone in the company go, that's what I want to do. That's what we're doing together. We're not fighting each other. We're not even fighting the competition. We're moving to a particular place. And that if they don't get that, if they don't get where we're going, if they don't believe that it's a great place to go, then that's a failure in my job. So if I've got smart people around me who want to help go to that place, then the company will be great. I would say that the thing when you're trying to be reasonably single-minded about getting somewhere, you've also got to have an amount of humility that says, I've hired smart people. I may be wrong on some of these steps. And actually, their input into where we go is really key because they're smarter than me anyway. So I've got to listen to find out from them. And I've got to be, and it's active listening. And it's not just about listening and then ignoring them and moving on. Sometimes you won't take their advice. Sometimes you absolutely won't. But you should always listen to that advice and believe in it and believe that it comes from the right place. So I always want feedback about my ideas, and I always want to listen to their ideas And somehow together we'll work out the best way of getting to where we're all trying to get to. Because I don't know the answers. And it's certainly for me in this company, I mean, almost half the people in the business are either engineers or product people. And I had no experience of engineers or product people until we founded the company. And frankly, those engineers, I mean, they're all incredibly bloody smart. And so I would be utterly stupid if I didn't listen to them. So they will really help work out how is the best way of pushing towards that. And also say, what about doing this thing? And you go, oh, actually, we're still, the vision is still there, but the way we get there and sometimes where we're going might change a bit.
That's really interesting. I like the inspirational side of things there, especially as we've had a couple of clients and people contact us to ask how they implement that mission and vision throughout the business and make sure it's not diluted from the top down or from the bottom up. So how do you communicate that, and how do you ensure that the mission or the vision isn't diluted throughout the different sort of hierarchy within the business?
It's a continuous battle. As businesses grow, everyone gets further away from the founding vision and the founding founder. Everyone comes with a different background. They're starting being interdepartmental issue. Yeah, you just get that stuff as businesses get bigger. There's no way of avoiding that, but you can fight it all the time. And the only way to do it is to fight it continuously. So yes, I stand on a podium and talk to people about what the vision is and where they should go there. But I also speak to people at the coalface. I work on specific projects with, the most junior person and the most senior person, and we'll sit in a room and we'll argue about stuff, and we'll try and make a particular project work towards getting us to the vision. So it is, hierarchy doesn't work. You can't cascade, I don't think, a vision particularly well. I think you have to be shouting it continuously, reminding people continuously, working directly with people and reminding them that the project they're working on, if it's not going towards the vision, it's not a useful project to be working on. So I see it as the core part of my job, to be honest. Yeah.
It's interesting. I think the words or the approach that kind of sprung to my mind as I was trying to visualize what you were talking about is it's almost like you're playing culturally to keep the vision alive and keep the culture alive as you've scaled. It sounds to me like you're kind of playing like offense and defense at the same time. Is that a fair kind of way to put it?
That is fair. You've just got to be very, very careful about. I think we have a very strong culture. I'm very proud of our culture, but you have to work on it every day, every single day.
Well, would you say that's one of the keys for the business in terms of creating creativity and innovation, having that one goal, one vision? Because people then aren't necessarily concentrating on the task in hand, but they're thinking of the bigger picture, so they can come up with those ideas, and you obviously have a safe space for them to voice those ideas as well.
It's really interesting when you start thinking about safe spaces particularly, because we have an experimental culture. Right? So one of our mantras is kill, scale, and amend. So if you're experimenting something, kill it, great, very happy with that. Scale it, yeah, great, very happy with that. Amend is failure. So every time you amend something, you're like, oh, you're dragging the project out, it slows things down. So either kill or scale if you can. Fine, you amend once, but if you're amending a project 3 or 4 times, you're just procrastinating. I think pushing hard to continue that pace is just really important.
Just on that, like that seems quite core to you and your approach to business, your approach to creating a performance creative culture that has allowed Zappi to kind of become market leading in what you do. What I'm interested in the self-leadership and the role modeling aspect of that. So where has that come from? Which do you have role models that you've learned that from? And if so, can you share any with us?
Yeah, sure. So we have try to have a learning culture, and I'm all into that. So I do read books. I read business books on occasion. I read history books, and there's a lot of leadership stuff in history books. I would say very specifically, when I moved to Asia, I had a boss who was the founder of the company. I was very junior. He worked with me on stuff. He was very inspiring. I would run through walls for him. I worked every day on a Saturday, all day for it. if the company needed something, I'd be there at 10 o'clock at night. At 5 o'clock in the evening, he would put a beer on my desk. So it was a very fun place to be, but incredibly hardworking, and I loved it. So I suppose that type of culture is the type of culture I've always wanted to create. But also, you learn from play. To be fair, when I was in the States, I liked my boss. He was a very nice chap, but had no desire to do anything exciting or innovative, and was very happy just piddling along and making sure we grew at 2.3%, which was 0.1% more than the other. It's really important for me that people have psychological safety to fail, but not to have psychological safety not to take the shot. So mediocrity is not acceptable. Going for it and failing big time, absolutely no problem whatsoever. And I think that's the type of environment for high performance that you need to encourage. Is you've got to take the shots, right?
And how do you actively encourage that? Because that's often a question that we get asked. So we go through exactly what you've explained. Then the question that always comes back is, how do you instill that trust? So an employee is onboarded, and from day one, how do you show that the environment is a safe space for that? How do you get across that you are trusting and it is safe to try new things and not to amend?
It's again, that's continuous updating. Although, I mean, we have a Friday roundup every week. So I do, it's like half an hour, and we have different people doing different things. I compare it, and we'll have a DJ, and it's fun. But one time I did the entire 30-minute Steve's greatest fuck ups, and I just went through the top 10 things that I'd really messed up during the run of the business, and the point of it was to show right from the founder on, everyone does it, and that's okay. There's no problem failing. Just learn from it and make better decisions next time. And so you have to just admit it when you do it yourself, and celebrate other people failing because they took a shot, right? And learn from it and trying something else. Culture's hard. It's not. There isn't like a, there's a switch. I put it on a Notion page. Just go and read that, and then you're done. You'll get it. It's just every day.
No, I like that. It's refreshing to hear about that vulnerability. It's quite often hard for many leaders to do and to appear vulnerable, especially in front of an audience. So that's really refreshing to hear. I like that.
Yeah, I think so. I was just thinking, I hope that someone recorded your top 10 fuck ups, and that's now the onboarding video that everyone sits through. It's like, congratulations, welcome on board, Zappi.
That's actually a really good idea. We do have onboarding videos, but I don't think that's one of them. I'll try and make sure it is.
Will be now.
Well, maybe we'll do another podcast episode, and we'll just ask for your top 10.
The top 10, yeah.
and then you can have them internally, because I actually think that's really powerful. Like, you can have those. I remember, like, in my last role as a full-time kind of head of people, head of performance, we would make sure that the CEO came in and spoke to and did a Q&A with every joiner. It was harder to do as the business scaled, but it was some of the most important, like, face time that those people got. And I'm just thinking now, like at a certain point, having access to someone having pre-thought, well, these are the top 10 things that I've screwed up and this is what I've learned from them. I think technology enables us to capture that now. So
yeah, I think it's a very good idea. I think it's a very good idea.
There's a couple of questions that come out of that as well, in terms of, are you a reflective person? So to enable you to think about those top 10 and then to voice that, are you quite reflective, or as a business, do you look back on the things that could have worked better? So constantly evolving what's been done to be better moving forwards?
I don't think it's a natural tendency for mine, but it's something I've learned. The developers, the technology side of it, they call it a retro, right? So they're very good at doing retros, and it's so, you know what it's like. A project hasn't quite worked, and it's like, oh, quick, let's go on to the next one and ignore. Whereas what the technology people do, and this is a really good example, that because it's not Zappi, it's just generally in tech. And it was also how the airline industry got enormously safe, right? I mean, it's just a good way of doing it. Is that every time you go through a failure, and frankly, even a success, you do a proper retro, and everyone who was involved gets into the room, and there's no blaming. It's not about blaming. It's not about diagnosing. Well, it's sort of about diagnosing what went wrong, but in order to learn the lesson so that next time you improve. And as long as you focus on next time we improve, and no one walks out of that meeting thinking, oh my God, I've just been blamed for something, because that would be the worst outcome. They just think, oh, okay, that would have been a better way to do it next time. I've learned something, thanks very much. If you retro in that way, in a really healthy way, then everyone just ups their game every time.
You've literally just mirrored how the Red Arrows do their debriefs. Literally. So, Red 5, Patrick Kershaw came on and told us about their debriefs. They don't use names, so they take the emotion out of it. It's literally Red 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And they go through and quite aggressively or quite precisely explain the error that they can see and how they would fix it. And they go through like that. And then afterwards, actually, it's fine. They walk away, take away the emotion from it. They're all still friends. But yeah, you've explained exactly how the Red Arrows almost do theirs as well.
Yeah, and I think there's big lessons that, like, people leaders. So whether you're a sales leader, sales manager, or lead the marketing team or the finance team, like, that's a skill set that I think that people need to tap into from the tech side of businesses, from the military, from sport, that plan, do, review cycle. And I think that's one of the things that we teach in our leadership development programs is everyone who is a leader of people. If you think about every interaction you have with your team or an individual in your team, you should be planning it, hopefully, doing it, but then reviewing it afterwards to think, right, did I get the desired impact I wanted when I was mentoring that person or coaching that person, etc. So we can learn a lot from tech in terms of those retros and performance teams.
And I would also say, I mean, you've got to be able to go into that room, and as a leader, I think if you go into that room and people are not prepared to blame you or criticize you or say, this decision, which everyone sort of knows was Steve's decision, didn't work or was wrong, then you've got a problem. Mm-hmm. So fortunately, I know I don't have that problem because people constantly blame me for stuff. There's a book about this, I'm sure you guys have read it, which it contrasts the way the airline industry approached this in the 70s with the way hospitals and doctors approached it. And doctors have this such strong hierarchy that no nurse will question a doctor, and so they don't learn, and it's really bad, and it just hasn't come on. Patient health hasn't improved as much as planes just don't crash anymore. I mean, they just sort of don't, and it's because of this review system and a complete openness to not make it hierarchically dependent, but to just think about the decision, just think about the improvement, just think about the safety.
Yeah.
It was that black box thinking, wasn't it, where they took away the blame element. So there was no blame culture and actually just dug into what caused the crash or what caused the fatality, the operation.
For our viewers and listeners, I think it's by Matthew Syed, but don't quote me. If it is, we'll find it, we'll put it in the link, because it's a great book. And you're right, there's that kind of let's sweep it under the rug kind of, because it's litigious doctor environment operation. And I think it was US they looked at versus the airline industry, where, if someone said to you, there's a 98% chance that your plane won't fall out of the sky, you still wouldn't fly.
That's not exactly what you hear, is it?
No. Whereas if someone says to you, well, this operation has a 98% survival rate, people are much more comfortable to go, oh, that's great. That sounds brilliant. Okay, cool. So I think, look, we've looked at role modeling and self-leadership, and actually I think a lot of what we've discussed as well has kind of moved into that idea that we have of teamship, so collaboration. And I think you've given us a bit of an insight into your approach to collaboration, and that stems from that vulnerability and that openness to receive feedback and receive it often. What other ways do you ensure kind of teamship and collaboration within the business?
In the business, there are two other really key people in terms of managing people and culture, I would say. So there's a guy called Tom Hollis, who is the head of people and culture. He was one of the first employees. In fact, he was the first employee at Zappi. He's gone through multiple different spaces. He really cares and understands and knows the journey we've been on, and is really passionate about the culture and pushing that culture and performance throughout the organization. So he is the driving force of that. And so I help him and advise him wherever I can. And then also we have a president, a guy called Ryan Barry. He sits in the States, and he is much, much better at people management, structure, teams, making sure and thinking about those performance of the teams and are they doing the right thing. And so I think between the three of us, it's a divide and conquer. area. It's definitely not me. It is a triumvirate, and some things I'm good at, and sometimes some things I'm not. And so it's working out which of us leads in the different spaces.
Yeah.
It kind of ties into the question about the followership as well, I think. So, Ryan, the president, how do you or how do you ensure that you are open to allowing people to follow you, or yourself? How do you be a good follower to them as well when the circumstances arise? And you mentioned as well right at the beginning, actually you're not the expert in quite a lot of things, and you're humble enough to realise that the experts are the people working with you, for you, on your team. So I think I've just answered the question myself, but if you'd like to elaborate on that, and I think that ties in quite nicely with what Ben asked as well.
Yeah, I think we have a concept. I think we still have the DRI, so directly responsible individual. So any major project, in fact, any decent sized project that the company is doing, there will be a DRI, and that is the person who is saying, "Look, I'm the person. I'm the one responsible for making sure this is either successful or we cut it down quickly." Right? One of those two things. I am on quite a few projects where I am not the DRI. I'm the DRI on some of them, not the DRI on others. If I am not the DRI, then I'm a follower. Right? They're leading the project. I'm just there to help advise, do a piece of the work that can help them do it. So then I have certain expertise. It's probably my traditional research expertise that they're interested in. So my role in that team is not the CEO or the founder. My role is a research expert, and I'll input the research expertise. But if they want to ignore it, it's up to them. They're the DRI of the project. So your title is your, I suppose, is a view of your overarching role in the business, but it's not the role you play on a team on a day-to-day basis. That depends on what the team needs.
Yeah, so that's a really, really good answer. I like the DRI.
Yeah.
We're going to say now when we teach that it came from Zappi, via Amazon.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I think that was a really solid answer, and I'm interested in the human side behind that. So there's got to be moments in those projects where you're not the DRI and you're a follower, where you as the CEO, the hierarchical leader potentially in that room, is thinking, crap, I think this is going to fall flat on its face, or I don't think we're quite going the right direction. But it might not be your sector of your area of expertise, etc. So how do you manage what must be the tendency to be like, I kind of know how this might play out, to make sure that people have the opportunity to succeed or fail?
So I would give my advice. So okay. and I would expect them to listen to my advice, but then I expect them to listen to anyone's advice. But so if I think that the project's going to fail for three reasons, I will say I think the project will fail for these 3 reasons. Now I'd expect them to take that on board, but they may well know it much better than me, and they'll have it. So I've given my opinion. So that's fine. It's still their call. I'm not going to make the decision for them. I don't want to run the project. I'm running other projects. I've done the DRI on other stuff. They're the DRI. They're ones responsible. So it does happen, but it doesn't create tension, I don't think. The other thing, and this is another Amazon thing, phrase, which is disagree and commit. So we all want something to succeed. We may think it won't for various reasons, but we want it to succeed. What I'm not prepared to do is say, I'm going to wait around, see you fail, and then say I told you so. That's just no use, right? I mean, that's just negative. Whereas if I say I don't think it'll work for these 3 reasons, and they say, yeah, we're going to try it anyway because we think it'll work because of these 2 reasons, I'm going to go, okay, disagree, but I'm going to commit. So anything I can do to help you make that project successful, even if I don't think it's going to be, anything I can do to help that make that successful, I will do. Because, and I'm not going to be happy when it fails. I'm going to be annoyed when it fails, and I'm going to make sure we retro it and make sure we learn from it.
And that's reflected throughout all of the team and all the employees, is it, that disagree and commit? Is that how you become more effective and more efficient and sort of shave down the process from sort of 4 weeks to 1 week back in sort of 2013 when you started?
It's how we try. Again, do we do that all the time? Of course we don't. we have new people joining, we have old people joining, we've had egos, we have politics. I mean, we have all of those things. But you're always fighting the good fight for embedding those cultural aspects. So that, as I said before, that is part of my job. It's trying to remind people about things like disagree and commit, about being personally responsible, about giving advice and not getting shouty, about helping people out. You know, those are the things that make, I think, a company more successful. And I really wish I could write them on a poster and put them up in the office and then go, yeah, okay, that's that job done. I can move on with something else. And sadly, you just have to continue fighting that fight.
Yeah, I think when you mentioned the disagree and commit, I think we have the Amazon wall. I'm not sure which wall it is, but it's got their leadership.
Yeah, I know that one.
Do you know their famous picture? It's got disagree and commit.
The leadership principles.
And it's always, I always find it really interesting where people have their values, their behaviors on the wall, and we get invited in to talk to the company, to do a trade needs analysis, etc. And you walk past the values. I can think of one of our clients we work with. You walk past their values, you turn right into a glass-walled meeting room, you sit down, and I was sat there with the windows behind me, glass wall, values, literally like probably 10 meters of values written down. Group of people in front of me said, great, so can you share with me what your values are and what they mean? And the looks were like, oh crap, agility? Okay, what does that mean? Oh, I think it means this. Oh, I think it means that. And you just like, it's an ongoing challenge that actually, I imagine when, you talked about your chief people officer, I think it was employee number one, like you go from employee number one, it's easy, isn't it? It's sort of easy to say, this is my vision, this is how we behave, like how do you want us to behave, etc. When you go multi-geography, multi-office, 330 people, growth plans, investment, etc. I think your bit about, earlier, you're playing offense and defense culturally and behaviors and expectations the whole time. You could probably spend all day talking to people to kind of reiterate that inspiration a bit, I imagine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you, on that, just really, really quickly, do you think that point that you get to when you're sort of 300 plus and the vision and the goals tend to become more diluted or it becomes harder work, is that when the basics become even more important? So having sort of those terms of reference, the ways of working really embedded, so doing the small things, doing them well, even when no one's looking, does that help you strive for maintaining that goal, do you think? Has that worked with yourself? What is the importance of those ways of working?
Yeah, very much so. So we've grown from probably 150, 200 people in 2019 to 330 now. And so a lot of that is through COVID, and a lot of that is without people being in an office together. And I'm sure lots of people have faced the same thing. It's just harder. You don't have as many water cooler moments. You don't have as many natural meetings with people in the office. One of the things that one of the engineers did really early on in COVID was build a little Slack plugin that basically I have everyone in the company who signs up for it has a random meeting with someone else in the company every 2 weeks. So I have a random coffee with someone in the company every 2 weeks, which is really nice. It's a really nice virtual coffee. But those types of touch points become really important. We also got the whole company into an away week. We try and do teams away together, but I think it's become harder when you're not in the same place together as often, when there's less face-to-face time. And so there's ways of trying to combat that, the couple I've just mentioned. But it is the area I think that we just have to continue working harder and harder on as the company grows into numbers of employees, as we bring in brilliant talent, but from different places and different ways of working, and they're used to those ways of working. And one of the things we've struggled with is we have an onboarding process so that they get to know their colleagues and their company and their job and what the problems are and what they're trying to fix and all this sort of stuff. And within that we talk about the culture and what we're trying to do and how we're trying to work together with people. And then sometimes we've had problems, like 3 months down the line, we found they they've just got the culture wrong, and they're doing things that would have been absolutely the right thing to do in their last company, but are just wrong within Zappi. And again, we've looked at that and gone, okay, that's a problem with onboarding, because we've said something, we've said what the culture is, but we haven't helped them live it for a period of time. So yeah, the whole, it's always a work in progress. It's always a work in progress. You're always trying to look at problems, diagnose them, trying to get back to where you want to be, which is with the high performance, with the particular culture, going towards the vision. That's where you always got to be centered, but there's always going to be issues that you're fighting underneath to keep things on track.
Yeah, I think it's such a relevant thing right now, because everyone is wrestling with that idea of hybrid, virtual, face-to-face, how many days in the office, etc. And how do we nurture culture when we're onboarding people? How do we create those positive collisions? Because what you've just described are two great examples of creating meaningful positive collisions, because like we're massive advocates of creating those collisions, because if then people go off to different states in the US or different areas of the world, and they're part of a team that's geographically spread, the relationships they build when they have those offsites or those times together, that's kind of what, when the chips are down and they're in a difficult phase, that's what keeps the tribalism and the stickiness, I think, in those teams, isn't it?
Yeah, no, definitely.
Well, what is just out of interest, your policy? Have you asked people to come back into the office, or can you work quite effectively remotely, given that some people are struggling with that sort of dichotomy, whether to bring people in or not, or how flexible they become? I mean, it sounds like you've ticked all the boxes everywhere else, and it's a pretty effective business model in terms of the way you're operating. What's your take on that hybrid working? Because I think some people can take away some key lessons from you on that.
Two of our core values are trust and truth. So we will trust people, and we will always tell the truth. We're always transparent, but the truth is also about getting to the underlying problem, not doing surface truth, just really asking the 5 whys, getting to what the core problem is. On the trust side, we trust people to do a great job and to want to help Zappi achieve our vision. We trust people to do that. We trust people to work in the best way to do that. I personally cycle into work. It's 25-30 minute cycle, depending on how fit I am. And I love going into the office. I'm in there 4 days a week, but half the time there's hardly anyone in there. So there might be a core of 20 of us. And I think most of the people who come in, well, there are some exceptions. They tend to be people who live nearer. And I know that some people hate the idea of commuting and think, why on earth would I spend an hour each day going into an office when I can work 2 more hours a day, helping achieve the vision? Like, okay, smart, make the right decision. I would much prefer everyone to live in a flat next door to the office, and we could all hang out at the water cooler all the time. But it's just not how life is anymore. And so we trust people to make the smartest decision for themselves and the company.
That's the 5-year plan. Is it a Zappi campus, sort of Google-esque?
That would be nice.
Get accommodation on site.
Yeah, great. Like, that sounds amazing. We could have a little learning academy. We could set up a Zappi learning academy for you, university. Steve, thank you. We're coming to the end of our time together now, and I want to ask you our West Peak question. I think a lot of us as leaders experience those second summit or false summit or West Peak moments. And so we want to ask all of our guests to share, it's like a bit of vulnerability, share one of those West Peak moments that they've had and what they've learned from it.
So I mentioned the president of the company, Ryan Barry. He's incredibly young. He's like 35 or something, but most of the time much wiser than me. And he said to me one time, we were having a discussion about something, and I was saying, why hasn't this happened? He said, well, when was it a priority? And I said, well, 6 months ago, I said, this is really important. And I think he said to me something like, you do realize you say one thing, people listen, but then if you don't repeat it, if you're not following up on it, if you're not checking in, then it doesn't mean it's going to happen. It just means that you want it to happen. And it made me think that as a leader, it just reminded me about communications internally, and that whole thing of 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. If I want anything done, I have to accept responsibility for being the DRI on it effectively, and for pushing it through, and for constantly monitoring the performance on it. And you can't just snap your fingers. That's just not how leadership works. So that was one of my moments, of many, to be fair.
I like that. There's been many from this this session as well. I'm just trying to tot up in my head all of the different lessons that people can take away. I think this is going to be a really interesting one for people to listen back to quite a few times and take away.
Yeah, I think so. Steve, thank you very much for inspiring us. And
Thank you.
We look forward to speaking to you again soon, hopefully. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks for joining us on the How They Lead podcast.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode and learned something new about the world of high performance.
If you have any feedback or suggestions for future episodes, please don't hesitate to reach out to us.
And don't forget to subscribe to the How They Lead podcast on your favourite platform so you never miss an episode.
Until next time, keep pushing yourself to reach your full potential and evolve the way you perform.
And remember, just because something has always been done a certain way doesn't mean doing it a new way can't work.